Jesus faked his own death. This is a more modern variation on the apparent death theory, popularized by a book called The Passover Plot, and also featuring in one of the books that inspired the Da Vinci Code. The idea is that Jesus staged his own death. It was a pseudocide. He did a Reggie Perrin. And why did he do this? Well, in order to fulfill Old Testament prophecy and so that he could convince everyone that he was the Messiah, he got himself crucified, he staged his death by crucifixion, and then he rose from the dead. So this was all an elaborate hoax involving Joseph of Arimathea and other of Jesus' followers. And what happened was that at the time where Jesus was dying on the cross and cried out, "I thirst," and they go and get the sour wine and put it as a sponge to his lips, what had actually happened was that the conspirators had secretly, without the crowd or the Roman soldiers seeing, exchanged the sour wine with a powerful sedative mix. And so, as Jesus drank that sponge, he went unconscious, and his heart rate and his breathing rate slowed to becoming completely imperceptible, so that he appeared, to all intents and purposes, dead. So this is the Juliet strategy from Romeo and Juliet, where she drank a potion that shut all of her systems down so that everyone thought she was dead, so that she could marry Romeo. Obviously, you remember that didn't work out so well for her, but it did work out okay for Jesus. Joseph of Arimathea had bribed Pilate to allow Jesus' body to be taken down from the cross before he was fully dead. And then as they wrap the supposed corpse in the burial cloths, they give him an antidote to the potion. And so when he's then laid in the tomb, he revives, he rolls back the stone, he slips past the Roman guard, he then appears alive, Jesus is risen, and everyone thinks that he's the Messiah. Does this theory work? The first thing is that it requires Jesus to be a deceiver. This is the man who is respected as the most highest moral teacher the world has ever known. But actually, he was a con man. Does that fit any of the facts we know about Jesus? And while it's true that there were Old Testament prophecies that predicted the crucifixion and also predicted the resurrection, none of these prophecies connect crucifixion and resurrection with the Messiah. The Messiah was expected to be a powerful, conquering king. He wasn't expected to die, let alone to rise from the dead. So this plot wouldn't have convinced people that Jesus was the Messiah, particularly dying of crucifixion, dying as a criminal, dying the shameful death of being crucified, dying cursed by God because he was hung on the tree. This is not a good strategy to convince people who are not expecting it that you are the Messiah. Obviously, this is a very audacious plot to fake your own death, and to do so, to fake your death, not by suicide, not like Reggie Perrin, by leaving your clothes at the edge of the sea and then disappearing and everyone thinks that you've drowned, but by actually getting yourself arrested and getting yourself executed by professional soldiers. So this is a very risky strategy. Some would call it foolish. Remember, only one person in all of recorded history has only ever survived crucifixion. Now that's a lot less than have survived being attacked by great white sharks. So would you stage your death by getting into the water with a great white shark? Would you stage your death by climbing into the mouth of a great white shark? It's a very risky, some would say foolish, strategy. And of course, once Jesus is arrested, what happens to him is entirely out of his hands. How badly he's beaten, whether actually they beat him so badly he dies before getting crucified. And then, of course, to fake your death by first being scourged, by being whipped with these flagellum of leather straps, bone fragments, metal ball bearings, designed to introduce maximum trauma, maximum tissue damage as they whip your exposed back, leaving you with huge trauma, huge amounts of blood loss, often killing people or at least leaving them half dead. This is a very risky strategy. And then faking your death by being crucified, the most painful form of execution so far invented in ancient history. Faking your death by having nails driven through your hands, severing your median nerves, paralyzing your hands permanently from then on, and having nails driven through your feet, destroying your heel bones, crippling you permanently thereafter. This is a very risky strategy. And just one miscalculation and you're dead. And remember that the common practice for Jewish criminals who were being executed was that their legs would be broken so that they would stop breathing and die before nightfall. And this was written in Jewish law. So again, you're taking a very risky strategy. Jesus is a Jewish man, that they're not going to do this common standard practice of breaking the legs and thus killing you by suffocation. Remember too, that as soon as Jesus takes this sedative and falls unconscious, his body now sags on the cross. He can no longer push himself up in order to breathe, and he now asphyxiates himself. He now suffocates himself because his sedation means he can no longer do the very thing that was keeping him alive, of breathing. And so the very fact of introducing a sedative into the plot actually means that Jesus would no longer be able to push himself up, no longer to be able to breathe, and so the sedative would kill him by asphyxiation. And then you've got the Roman spear thrust into his thorax, piercing either his heart and causing the blood and the pericardial fluid to come out, or piercing his lungs and causing the fluid of asphyxiation built up in his lungs to come pouring out. Either way, you're dead. And if not, you've got a pneumothorax, which untreated will cause you to asphyxiate and die anyway. So this whole case is just built on unbelievable risks, unbelievable foolishness, that this is the way you're going to try and fake your death. And you're basing it all on the fact that these professional executioners are somehow going to fail in their task and are somehow going to not notice that you're not really dead. So it's a huge gamble. And you've then got all the arguments against the swoon theory added on to this theory about faking the death, with the added implausibility that you've actually done this to yourself on purpose. It's like faking your death by not putting fake bullets in a gun, but by actually being executed by a firing squad and hoping that none of them actually kill you when they shoot you. And so this theory does not fit any of the facts of the resurrection. It doesn't account for the crucifixion properly. It doesn't account for the empty tomb properly, because it has all the same problems that David Strauss raised with the swoon theory. It doesn't account for the eyewitness appearances of Jesus. It doesn't account for why Paul or James would be convinced, or why those involved in the conspiracy would be willing to die for this and to suffer for something that they knew to be untrue. And so the fake death theory does not fit any of the facts.